Hello ladies and gentlemen, it's finally here, the last video of Bannockburn Month. Where did that month go? Today, for our final video, we are going to count the cost of the Battle of Bannockburn. Today we are going to look at the aftermath and the consequences of Bannockburn. And hopefully through doing this we are going to get our heads around the significance of Bannockburn. Why is it important? Why has it been worth me spending the last month trying to get these videos out on a semi-regular schedule? Hopefully you will remember way back when we were looking at the kind of plan that Bruce was putting together, when we were looking at the reasons for fighting and all that, you will remember that I had stated that the aim of the two sides was to kill or capture the enemy king. That's what both armies really want to do at Bannockburn. And hopefully you remember from the last video that at the end of the battle, neither side had actually accomplished that. Edward certainly hadn't got his big win over Bruce. He hadn't killed him, he hadn't captured him, but neither had Bruce been able to get his hands on Edward after all of this effort, all of this struggle and hardship. He had beaten Edward on the battlefield. That's a big plus for the Scots, but Bruce had not managed to capture or kill Edward. The English king had escaped back to England. And again, hopefully you'll remember when we were talking about the different armies at Bannockburn, you'll remember that the English outnumbered the Scots at least 2-1, perhaps closer to 3-1. So even if we allow that Bruce had killed maybe a third of the English army at Bannockburn, even that's probably being a little bit generous, even if we suppose that Bruce had killed, say, a third of the English army, the army that escapes from Bannockburn, the English soldiers that managed to get away from Bannockburn, would still outnumber the army that Bruce had at the start of the battle. Okay? Now all of this is to make clear to you that fundamentally Bruce's problems are never going to be solved by a battle. The war between England and Scotland, the First War of Scottish Independence, is never really going to be solved on the battlefield. England can always absorb the odd military defeat and come back still with more men than the Scots can field. So if there is going to be a conclusion to the war, and a particularly one that favours Bruce, it's going to have to be delivered through negotiation. He's going to have to try and screw a deal out of the English. That, of course, is the appeal of managing to capture Edward, is that it gives Bruce a great deal more leverage in those kinds of negotiations if he has the king as a captive. That's about the only way that the Scots could use a battle to bring the war to a speedy conclusion. So given that Bruce doesn't get that, given that Edward escapes, let's have a look at the outcomes of the Battle of Bannockburn and see what the positives are for Bruce. Well, some minor positives to start with. Some of the Englishmen who've died at the Battle of Bannockburn are certainly individuals who Bruce is quite happy to live without. John Comyn, the son of the John Comyn, Lord of Badenoch, who Bruce had killed back in 1306 in Greyfriars Kirk in Dumfries, he dies fighting for the English at the Battle of Bannockburn, as does his cousin Walter Comyn. So there's two Comyns down, two potentially fearsome rivals, rivals who could potentially boast a degree of influence, could within Scotland, could potentially drum up some support, some kind of internal pressures against Robert just on the strength of their names alone as much as anything. They're gone, they're out of the picture. Good riddance to them as far as Bruce is concerned. Also, of course, Gilbert de Clare, the Earl of Gloucester, has been killed. He had been quite a pro-war voice within the English royal administration, within the English political community. He had really worked hard in the years before Bannockburn to try and unite the English political community around the war in Scotland, trying to push for unity among the English nobility so that they could focus in their efforts on finally conquering Scotland after all these years. So Bruce is probably not too sad to see that voice, that influence removed from the English political situation. And Edward, of course, now has to go home and explain to all of his opponents why he has spent all of their money, as we were saying earlier, wasted all this time, wasted all these men, cost the English not just cash but lives, and has accomplished nothing for it, in spite of the fact that the English political community had previously tried to constrain Edward's ability to act in this aggressive military way with the ordinances of 1311. So we might expect in the aftermath of Bannockburn, and sure enough this does prove to be the case, that the kind of anti-war party within English politics, spearheaded of course by the King of England's main rival, his cousin, Thomas Earl of Lancaster, the anti-war party becomes much more vocal, much more influential within English royal politics in the years after Bannockburn. They can exert much more pressure over Edward. Edward is under more pressure to conform to their expectations and demands as a result of this disaster at Bannockburn. That's all good news for Bruce. That again takes some of the pressure off him, gives the Scots some breathing room, gives them some time to refocus their efforts on things other than just sort of physical defense of the realm. Now there are also, as well as those deaths, there are a handful of significant captures. The English, Geoffrey Barrow, who has written one of the most influential scholarly biographies of Robert Bruce, famously observed that the English get off kind of lightly at Bannockburn in terms of casualties and captives. But there are a few notable captures. Not really that many that are going to put too much, or cause too much of a problem for the English, and certainly not those taken at the battle. However, some of the Englishmen who managed to escape from the battlefield are rallied by Humphrey de Bohun, the Earl of Hereford. We looked at him in our sort of dramatis personae video. The Earl of Hereford, one of the commanders of the vanguard, a sometime rival and opponent of King Edward. He rallies a bunch of guys who managed to make it across the Bannockburn and escape the battlefield, and he leads them down to Bothwell Castle, which is in Lanarkshire, being held for the English at this point by Walter Fitzgilbert, who is a Scot by birth. Fitzgilbert allows Hereford and his men into the castle, but when Edward Bruce, King Robert's brother, arrives at Bothwell with a Scottish army a day or two later, Fitzgilbert surrenders the castle and also these prisoners, including Hereford, the Englishman who had taken shelter there, surrenders the castle and his guests as prisoners to the Scots. Now this is a significant boost in the immediate aftermath of Bannockburn for the Scots, because Hereford is a hugely significant figure within England. Remember, he's the Lord Constable of England. He's a very powerful and influential marcher lord, and in the aftermath of Bannockburn, Edward can't really afford to have men such as Hereford languishing in a Scottish jail. So an agreement is pretty quickly reached for an exchange. Hereford is to be sent back south, but rather than exchanging him for a big wodge of cash, which is usually the way these sort of ransoms work, that's normally what you'd expect when someone is taken prisoner after a battle, that they would have to pay off in money their worth back to their captors. Instead, a prisoner exchange is arranged. Hereford is sent back to England, and back to Scotland comes Elizabeth de Burgh, King Robert's second wife, Marjorie Bruce, the king's daughter from his first marriage, and Christian and Mary Bruce, the king's sisters. All four of these royal women, struggling to count there, all four of these royal women have been captives in England since 1306, since the first year of Bruce's reign. So the last 8 years they have been absent. Now this is hugely significant for Bruce. First of all, getting his sisters and his daughter back means that he can start marrying them off, cementing some of the connections that have been important to him during the last 8 years, rewarding men who have been fighting for him for the last 8 years, or else encouraging individuals who might otherwise possibly fence sit a little bit to come over fully into Bruce's sphere of influence. But the return of Elizabeth is hugely significant because, of course, it now means he can start to try to build a dynasty. The great strength of having Elizabeth in English power, from an English perspective, has always been that as long as Bruce's wife is in English custody, not present with the king in Scotland, he can't produce any male heirs, can't produce any heirs whatsoever, quite frankly. But a male heir is crucial for Bruce. Remember when we looked in our first video at the situation that the Scots were in towards the end of 1313, when it looked like Bruce might be sick, might be on his way out. The king's only male relative, only significant male relative at this point, is his brother Edward Bruce. So the Scots, if something happened to Robert, could be on the verge of another succession crisis. But having Elizabeth back means that Bruce can now try, and it does still take a while, but he can try now to set that right, try now to develop a situation whereby in the event of his death there are multiple figures set out in the line of succession clearly, so that the Scots don't end up in a situation like they were in after the death of Alexander III and Margaret of Norway, which of course sparked off this whole First War of Scottish Independence in the first place. So, in the days after Bannockburn, you know, if you ask Robert Bruce sitting around on the evening of the 26th of June, which is when I'm filming this, you have a number of reasons to feel pretty good about yourself, to feel that this has been worth the risk, worth the effort, even though there has been that frustration of not actually accomplishing that main goal, that ideal goal of getting Edward under your power. However, to start to get a sense of the true significance of Bannockburn, why it has so much more long-term significance, we need to jump a few months ahead to November 1314, because in November Robert Bruce is back in the Stirling area. He's on the other side of the River Forth at Cambus Kenneth Abbey, holding a parliament. And at this parliament he pushes forward an ultimatum of sorts, possibly one that has been rattling around for a wee while, that essentially boils down to, if you want to hold land in Scotland, you must recognise Robert Bruce as the rightful king. If not, he'll take that land away from you, take away your titles, take away your property, and he will pass that on to anyone he likes. men whose loyalty he knows he can trust, men whose loyalty he is trying to buy, and who don't yet have significant lands or significant titles in Scotland. Now this is where the real lasting significance of Bannockburn comes in. The most important thing about Bannockburn is that it gives Bruce space to start acting as the real King of Scots, to start doling out patronage the way that the King of Scots is supposed to. In the years after Bannockburn, Bruce attempts something of a wholesale resettlement of the Scottish kingdom. He carves Scotland up among his most faithful supporters. He rebuilds the Scottish political community facing in towards himself. Now, if you want to be a Scottish nobleman, if you want to be a Scottish landholder, it is to Bruce that you must look to guarantee those lands, to protect your rights. No longer can people in Scotland have two masters. You can't, as the Bruce family did in the early years of the war, you can't easily claim lands in Scotland, claim lands in England, make peace with the King of England for your lands in England, make peace with the King of Scots for your lands in Scotland rather. Now you have to choose. You are either a landholder in Scotland, in which case you are recognising Bruce as your rightful king, and of course fighting tooth and nail to keep him in power, or else you are throwing in your lot with England and all of your stuff in Scotland then goes to some new boy, someone who Bruce is trying to shore up, someone who Bruce is promoting in order to garner their loyalty. Now this is really where the lasting significance of Bannockburn comes in, because of course these new men and these new families, families like the Douglases, the Stuarts are kind of old money, but they still gain huge boosts to their landed rights and property, to their titles, to their prestige under the Bruce regime. Families like the Campbells, the MacDonalds to some extent, the Hayes, the Keiths, all huge names in 14th and 15th century Scotland. All of these families fundamentally owe this huge upsurge in their fortunes to Bruce, to the service that they've provided for Bruce, for the service that Bruce wants from them going forward. Now that means that when inevitably the English raise another army and come north into Scotland and try to put the pressure on the Scots again, try to reoccupy Scotland, as they do several times over the coming years after Bruce's death. In fact, they even try during Bruce's reign. There's another invasion in 1322, major invasion. There's a large army comes north for the relief of Berwick in 1319, even before that. Those armies possibly as big as or even larger than the army that Bruce had beaten at Bannockburn. But when that happens again, there are always these families, the Douglases, the Hayes, the Keiths, etc., the Campbells, who will fight to protect Bruce's settlement of the kingdom, to protect Bruce, to protect his successors, because if anything happens to the Bruce settlement of the kingdom, if that is challenged by an English incomer, then all of the rewards that these men have received on the back of Bruce being able to push forward that ultimatum about recognising him as the rightful king or forfeiting your lands, if anything happens to Bruce and his successors, those rewards disappear, they go. They'll be taken back by whoever it was that owned them in the first place, or else doled out to the people that the English incomer wants to keep on side. So that, ladies and gents, is fundamentally the significance of Bannockburn. It allows Bruce to create a new Scottish political community that looks to the Bruce dynasty and its successors to protect its prosperity, to ensure its continued fortunes. In effect, it ties the new Scottish political community to an idea of Scottish independence. Independence from the English now becomes synonymous with protecting our interests, protecting our rights, protecting our lands, ensuring that the family fortunes remain safe. Now, there are various challenges to this. It's a little bit more complicated on the ground when we get into this sort of nitty-gritty of things, but fundamentally that, ladies and gents, is why Bannockburn becomes so important, why it looms so large in the popular consciousness, and why both interested amateurs and professional historians still pour so much time and effort and energy into studying the battle, into trying to understand what exactly was going on, what was going through the minds of the people there, so on and so forth. So that, ladies and gents, I guess is the thought that I would like to leave you with. Thank you so much to those of you who have endured these 7 videos. I do hope you've enjoyed them. I hope you found them interesting, illuminating. Maybe they've thrown out some ideas that you hadn't come across, or given you some new perspectives on things that you felt familiar with. The videos are not just going to stop now because the Bannockburn Month thing is over. I promise, try to keep the videos coming reasonably regularly. I'm also going to try and keep on top of the blog posts. If events go by, if anniversaries go by and I haven't put anything up, it will just be because things are manic at the moment. I think I mentioned in the launch video for this, I'm now working 2 jobs. So I don't have as much time to produce videos like this and produce blog posts as I used to. So I am trying to keep on top of these things, and I think I've kind of proven to myself at least that it is possible to produce these videos, quite low production as they are, but also write blog posts and so forth in my evenings, working around my strenuous work commitments for over the summer. So I promise I will try and keep these videos coming out. I've already got my schedule planned in terms of blog posts and videos and so forth for July, so I will do my best to keep on top of that, folks. Like and subscribe for more content, hopefully, fingers crossed. Thank you again for your patience and forbearance with these videos and my slow production rates and my stuttering, faltering delivery. Hopefully I will see you guys again for more videos soon. Also follow the blog for more written posts, more blog posts. Thank you over and over again. See you next time.